Good afternoon and welcome to the session What has COVID taught us so far, which will start in a few minutes. The session is brought to you by BIO.NRW and its cluster management. NRW stands for North Rhine-Westphalia, one of Germany's 16 federal states and also the most populous state. You can really say that NRW is located in the heart of Europe with 160 million people living within a one-day drive of the state capital Düsseldorf. It is also one of the most important economic regions in Europe, accounting for 4.5% of the European GDP. The federal state is especially known for its strong biotechnology and pharmaceutical industry, which is of particular importance in the fight against COVID-19. For this session, we invited panelists from 4 representative companies of the region, AiCuris, MLM Medical Labs, Qiagen and Bayer. They will discuss what lessons we have learned from the pandemic. Your host is Dr. Bernward Garthoff, the CEO of BIO Clustermanagement NRW.
Hello, on behalf of BIO NRW, the biotech network of the federal state of North Rhine-Westphalia, the largest state in Germany actually, I might welcome you to our BIO-Europe session regarding the impact of the corona pandemic on business in diagnostics and pharmaceuticals. And we will not focus on vaccine development and production, etc. We want to pinpoint today aspects and perspectives in the different branches of the industry. Clinics, IT, diagnostics, and all of that, and startups. And what region of the healthcare universe is better suited for such an analysis than North Rhine-Westphalia, with representatives of the different branches. I welcome with us in the studio 47 in Duisburg. So let me start right away with the representative of Bayer, Karl Ziegelbauer. Karl Ziegelbauer is originally from the area of biopharma, R&D. He's currently head of open innovation and digital technologies for the biopharma AG. And in this role, he oversees the R&D activities related to collaborations and partnering and digital technologies, including medical devices and e-health. Before this, Dr. Karl Ziegelbauer served as a senior vice president for the Therapeutic Research Group from 2014 to 2018. That's Ziegelbauer. So, of MLM Medical Labs, the CEO of it, Professor Dr. Stefan Wendt. He is the principal contact for pharmaceutical and biotech companies. His long career in the industry began in 1991 at Grünenthal, where he held biochemistry R&D position in the past. Professor Wendt.
Pleased to be here.
And of AiCuris, we have the CEO, Dr. Holger Zimmermann, with us. Holger took over responsibility as CEO of AiCuris in 2015 after 2 years as the company's managing director and deputy CEO and 6 years as its chief scientific officer. Prior to AiCuris, Holger worked at Bayer Healthcare as laboratory head and project leader in virology. Holger Zimmermann. So, and last but not least, online from the board meeting in Hilden, of Qiagen, the Senior Vice President, Life Science Business Area, Dr. Thomas Schweins, joined Qiagen in 2004 as Vice President, Corporate Strategy, and was appointed Vice President, Marketing and Strategy in 2005, where he was deeply involved in managing the global business toward life science customers. Dr. Schweins came to Qiagen from the Boston Consulting Group. And let me just start right away with Thomas. If any enterprise has had a lot of hurly-burly and news during outbreak and course of the pandemic, then certainly Qiagen. Urgent request for diagnostic kit that they have, and supplies for COVID, and now just recently a new kit system also out there. So you had to increase your staff substantially within short, And on top, the Thermo Fisher people were interested to take you over. Tell us, how did you manage all of that?
Thank you very much for the introduction. The past year has been really a roller coaster for us. Not only have we been in acquisition talks, and that finally resulted also in an attempt by Thermo Fisher to acquire Qiagen for more than 10 billion, but 2 days after the signature, the pandemic was announced by WHO, and since then everything has changed here for us. Not only have we been one of the key suppliers in the industry with a significant demand increase, but at the same time, we also have to suffer from the same effects than anyone else. We had the shutdown. Major parts of our business have been going significantly down. And at the same time, also people could not come to the office because of the constraints that we put in place. But what I have to say, after now almost half a year into the pandemic, things are going extremely well. People are highly motivated because they really feel that they can make a difference here. And also the business is doing good. In the area of non-COVID, we are only 5-6% below the plan, and then we have about 30% of our portfolio that is positively benefiting from the pandemic. So that from the original plan of 5-6% growth in my area, we are now going between 30 and 35% growth. So overall, this is really a great year from the business side. And the success that we have finally also ended up in having our shareholders not to agree to the Thermo Fisher deal. So that is over now, and we focus now back again as a standalone company. So it's quite an interesting year for us.
Okay, thanks a lot then. And Karl, similar alert situation and events at the BIO's headquarters here as well, similar as just discussed by Qiagen?
For us as a global organization, the first priority was to ensure health and well-being of all our employees globally. And then secondly, to keep critical production and supply chains going. And then thirdly, also supporting local communities as good as we can to deal with the pandemic. For example, here in the area, we support local testing labs with PCR equipment, with people that went there and helped doing the tests, but also donating things like hand sanitizers. More on a global level, we also supported, for example, a public health research institute in Canada to explore testing of existing compounds, interferon beta, chloroquine at the time, in combination with other drugs to see what eventually might work to treat COVID-19.
And in terms of clinicals?
I think in terms of clinical, the first goal was to ensure patient safety and also data integrity of the trials. And what we have to say that we really acknowledge the flexibility and the fast reaction of the health authorities in that critical situation. One challenge was, for example, that patients no longer could visit clinical trial sites. So our clinical supply management team very quickly established delivery of the drug medication to the patient, so picking it up from the site and making it available to the patient so that they could continue taking the medication. And this is now available in more than 48 countries globally. In addition, we started implementing things like remote monitoring or risk-based monitoring, really making use of the digital tools that we now have available. And actually the corona situation accelerated some of the implementation of those tools. Overall, this led to a situation where so far, yes, we have some delays of trials, but could manage the situation quite well.
Okay, thanks. And Stefan, MLM is assisting big pharma in managing their trials, as we just heard, worldwide. Now, what was your recent experiences and incidences while supplying that service? And talking about supplies, was there any breakdown in the supply chain, any interruptions? I mean, we've been talking so much about production in homelands. I mean, are there any materials besides masks that can be interrupted? Do we have to care about things?
I will come back to that question when I've asked the first one. Certainly in terms of clinical trials, we have seen at the beginning in March, April and May a slowdown of activities and a reduction of patient recruitment, and almost all trials came to a kind of pause. But then back in June, July, it came back to normal, and now we are almost at the same stage as what we have seen before. What was the most fascinating experience in this time was we have also been involved in one of the first COVID-19 vaccination trials, and that was set up by all stakeholders with very fast speed and performance, and was put into action then, or started in the first half of August. That was really fascinating to see how fast all stakeholders could react, also the authorities, to bring something on the road when the pressure is high enough. And we certainly would wish that that could also happen in other situations where there is a high medical need. In terms of the supply chain, there was very interestingly certainly some shortage of PCR testing and antibody testing, but very surprising for us was a bottleneck in the supplies of plastic materials. So tubes, collection systems, syringes were on back order for quite some time, and we had to convince our suppliers that we are critical in terms of COVID-19 research, and then we have been delivered with the materials. In terms of the other question of in-home, or let's say production here at home, I'm not very much convinced that the mask production here in Germany will be sustainable. We ordered masks from China, and with some delays we're also supplied with that, so I'm not too convinced that this is something that will be useful on the long run.
Okay, thanks. And Holger, I hardly can call AiCuris a startup on the opposite. I mean, you've been offering, even during the pandemic, an incubator for startups yourself as a company. Now let's talk about infections. I mean, apparently COVID is a little bit different, is new, a different level. Now you call yourself the powerhouse of anti-infectives, and yes, you've demonstrated in the past it by developing an anti-herpes product and was sold to Merck. Now, what was the impact on AiCuris, and how do you see the pandemic in perspective in the future? Or infections in general, what do you expect in the healthcare industry to happen?
We at AiCuris, as a company in the field, active in the field of infections, of course, had a different view on this. On one hand, it was a challenge, as we've heard from the other colleagues as well, and it was the same for us in terms that it was all in a sudden problematic to get lab supply and stuff like that. So we were also involved with Bayer in supporting local hospitals. We did testing and so on. So this, of course, was all in a sudden a big challenge. Also, how to organize work in terms of home office, lab. Probably you can't do in home office, but other work as well. So it's a new structure. The other thing is for us, it's clearly also an opportunity. So I think what Corona showed us, it put anti-infectives back on the map very dramatically. It also showed us what it means if you need something and you don't have it. So, and in that regard, you mentioned the incubator. So at AiCuris, we call this the iCubator. So we would like to support new ideas coming from academic institute, from small biotechs, and give them our knowledge support in early stages in order to make a difference, to come with new ideas and things like that. But overall, I think it's about a campaign which we just started. We called it Pandemic and Resistance Preparedness. And this is what COVID showed us. You need to be prepared. And we learned it the hard way, what it means not to be prepared. You mentioned that there's a lot of work ongoing in terms of vaccines, which is not the topic here. So we heard as well from Karl. So there are a lot of ideas. Use existing drugs to combat the infection, and we did the same. So we might also start a trial very shortly with an immune modulator who doesn't has an impact in the early phase of the infection. But this is all running behind. Because the infection is there, and we just need to see how to cope with this one. I think things will change. I hope things will change in that regard, that we need to be prepared for the next pandemic. And the last point, allow me to strengthen this as well. So I'm emphasizing this wherever I am. So we have a similar situation with antimicrobial resistance. So everybody talks about this. It could happen that there is a time where you need it and you don't have it. And I think now we really have to act here as well, to push also that field, which is in a way the same as a pandemic, where you don't know when it will happen. Problem here, of course, and this is a big question and the big challenge which we need to overcome as well, is pricing and reimbursement for products which you need but you don't sell. Right, and this is something where I hope that this situation is an opportunity that we can really change things here.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And we're coming back then to Stefan's aspect of, what is it we have to prepare for? What products do we have to have? And which one of those to produce in your own land, make sure that you have them?
I mean, certainly we have also seen that there were some shortages on, for example, standard medication, because that is coming from China and India. So I think the society has to evaluate the presence of the local or national or, let's say, European pharmaceutical industry much more than it did before. And I think the pandemic also brings that to the attention of the normal public, that it is that low prices are not the only aspect, and that it should be more enforced to have local production in order to secure supply chains, and then certainly to pay more for health.
What products are we talking about?
Well, certainly oncology products, then also the anti-infectives, but also standard cardiovascular drugs were on back order, and that's certainly not acceptable. But I think it's also not appropriate to just merely, let's say, complain. The society then also has to give the right financial contribution to that.
Similar problems at Bayer? Did we have problems in supplying?
Overall, given that we have a global production network with production site across the globe, I think that was manageable for us.
Okay. Holger, for you it was a special issue because you had a new kit coming up. The kits already were in demand, so you had a lot of additional people to put on. You managed somehow. Is supply of products, of plastics, things like that also an issue? Was it an issue?
Well, first of all, I would say the diagnostic industry was pretty well prepared. It only took 4 weeks until we had the entire sequence of the genome of the virus. And that helped us a lot to really also develop quickly PCR tests. I think even before the pandemic started, we already had PCR tests. But then when the whole field scaled up in an enormous amount, currently we have 100 million of tests that are produced every day. We also saw, of course, lots of bottlenecks. And plastic was already mentioned, and that's also one of the key problems in diagnostics, because many of the tests need plastics. And these plastics cannot be scaled up as quickly, because you need to buy new tools, and usually it takes 6 to 9 months to produce a new tool. And that's usually a problem. And we created that problem for our customers, but at the same time, we also buy a lot of plastics ourselves, and we also had supply issues here.
Well, Looking at the watch, I think at the clock we should have a summing up, and I start with you again. If there would be another pandemic, what would be your advice to do?
Well, I think for most of the countries, it would be good to have enough capacity for the critical components.
I think we would be much better prepared now that really happens. And I think this is this preparedness that is important, so that you then much more quicker can focus on what are critical activities you need to continue versus other things you could do remotely or simply postpone.
You mentioned already some of the issues, for example, making sure that it's not just complaining. What would you advise to do?
Well, I think this pandemic has already trained the society in a way for the appropriate behavior. I think we, especially in Germany, can be very happy about the adherence to the standards that have been implied. And also, when I look at my own company, the staff has been very supportive, also with our shift teams, which we implied. So I think the pandemic itself already is a very good training for the next one.
And Holger?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it already. So I think we need to be in an alert stage. So our campaign, Pandemic Preparedness, is really something what I think we need to follow up, which also means really think of infections which you don't know today. Then I think, as we've heard already, so we learned a lot how to tackle such a pandemic, and if a second will come, I think we are much better prepared because we learned a lot. What I think still needs to change a bit is the infrastructure. So we have more and more now what we could do, but then is how to apply it on the local level in a way, right? So if I hear that whatever a colleague gets a PCR result after 5 days, he did it. So there are a lot of things which are not as smooth as they should be. So I think it's a lot about being quicker and getting the systems to work, and hopefully this pandemic will also show us how to do those things better.
Okay, thanks a lot. That brings us to the end. We've shown that out of North Rhine-Westphalia, which has all the different branches of the industry, apparently we were relatively good in state, but there's more to be done. So thanks a lot to the people from the board here, from the forum, and all the best to you over there. Thanks a lot.